This is Mike Madrid, and you're listening to Red County, Blue County, Orange County, produced by UC Irvine School of Social Ecology. Over the last 4 decades, the politics of Orange County have been heavily influenced by cultural, economic, and societal changes that have culminated in the largest purple county in the nation. A Republican stronghold in the 1970s, dominated by wealthy business owners and property developers from Los Angeles, Orange County epitomized the values and priorities of its time. A period marked by economic growth, suburban expansion, and conservative social policies. But as the decades progressed, so too did the demographics of the community. The influx of recently arrived Latino and Asian immigrants seeking new opportunities, and the evolution of the workforce from blue-collar to high-tech brought about profound social changes. These shifts were not just demographic, but ideological, as new voices and perspectives began to influence the county's politics. By the 1990s and early 2000s, these changes had driven a dramatic political and social realignment. The red tide dominance waned and a blue tide was rushing in on the backs of Latina Congresswoman Loretta Sanchez and President Bill Clinton. The county that once stood as a bastion of conservative values now embraced a more diverse and progressive outlook, reflecting the growing multiculturalism and economic desires of its residents. Today we find ourselves in a county that has achieved a delicate hue of purple, a true balance, where the influence of red and blue is evenly matched. This equilibrium is not a sign of division, but of a vibrant democracy, where multiple perspectives coexist and contribute to the collective good, and it has ramifications for the entire country. Orange County is a microcosm, a study in the positive effects of a balanced democracy, and the rest of the country needs to be watching. In this episode, we peel back the curtain on modern-day Orange County. Where do we stand now, and what does the future hold? My first guest in this episode is California Senator Tom Umberg, a Democrat who has witnessed the county's transformation over the past 4 decades. Are you seeing less of a focus on economic issues and more of a focus from voters on cultural issues?
That's a very good question. I think that the cultural issues are issues that do seem to be motivating folks right now on both sides or on all sides, as opposed to economic issues. And maybe it's because the cultural issues are more easily identifiable, and economic issues, I mean, everybody's for economic progress, just easier. And I also think that people have become more tribal. In other words, that they identify with a tribe and then they ascribe negatives to the other tribe. And I think that that's not good at all for the body politic. That's not good for our future. I think that basically being sort of in a confrontational mode, and that's not just the folks that are out marching around, but you see that dynamic other places too. I mean, I think Donald Trump has contributed to that, but you know, maybe that may be reflective of my bias, that the sort of us and them kind of thing. When you ask the question, one of the things that is perhaps unique about the state Senate, there's only 40 of us. There's only 40 of us, and you don't hear a lot of personal acrimony. And one of the reasons, unlike the House of Representatives, there's 435 members of the House of Representatives. There's 40 of us. We sit together for long periods of time every week. I interact with probably every member of the state Senate at least once a week. And many, I sit next to folks who are Republicans all the time. We know each other. We know each other's families. So we don't stand up on the floor and usually and personally attack one another. And that helps. I think that helps make government work. The fact that we're 32-8, the Democrats overwhelmingly control the Senate, that means that most decisions are not exactly made on the floor, that the Democratic caucus controls virtually everything. And for good or for depends on your perspective, but that's the reality of it.
Now let's hear from Huntington Beach City Councilman Tony Strickland, a Trump Republican. One of the rising stars in Orange County's Republican circles, Tony Strickland was actually the first Gen X member of the California State Legislature, 2 counties north, in Ventura County, where I first met him 25 years ago. Today, he's brought a brash new style of prideful conservatism to Orange County, redefining what it means to be a Republican in this once red bastion. What's unique about you is, again, because of that legislative experience and how young you were, you have a perspective that kind of spans a little bit more time frame. We're not as young as we were. We're not old.
Right.
We're
Right.
a little bit. We're
Right.
a little bit more experienced.
Right.
And things are changing and they're in flux. But you were elected at a time when things were different. And as a younger first Gen Xer, you were kind of looking. I remember you talking and speaking about it, and kind of advising your colleagues about how to just bringing a different perspective. Can you talk a little bit about where the Republican Party was at then, and where California was at then?
Well, I think California was a golden state. When I got there, it was just right after Pete Wilson was governor. I think when California has a cough, the rest of the nation has a cold. And where we are today, we have pneumonia because California is in such a bad shape. We have over a $70 billion deficit today. And when you put that in perspective, my last year in the Senate, our whole budget was $98 billion. So we've increased government spending by 5 times over the last 10 years, which are you getting 5 times better services? Roads and highways and energy production. Are you getting that in your educational system, in the water system? I would say no. Most Californians would say no.
Yeah.
But I also want to point out, when I first got elected, it was also serving with some of the older, well, not older, but the more experienced members that didn't face term limits.
Right.
Giants of California politics. People like John Burton, John Vasconcellos, Ross Johnson, on both sides of the aisle. And what I learned back then is you can fight on issues. You see Ronald Reagan right here. Ronald Reagan fought Tip O'Neill all the time. But after 5 o'clock, they got together and they didn't take it personal. And they would try to beat each other on some of the issues that they thought were right to do, but they didn't make it personal, and they worked across the aisle. I would say,
Do you see that today?
I don't. In fact, I see a lot more of, and it goes back to the way we get media, and really elected officials represent their constituents. Think about back in the day. I remember telling my staff, and they didn't understand, I had a younger staff, and I said, I wanted to see the newspaper, and the way, we would do clippings to say, hey, what's going on in the news? And I always I read like 4 or 5 newspapers. I like to read the newspaper because you might go for one of the stories that, you might be in or something you're interested in. But then as you flip around, you say, oh, that's an interesting story. And that's an interesting story. You become more well-rounded. What I see happening today is if you're on the left, you go for information, you go to MSNBC and you go to CNN and you go to, different, radio outlets that, are that. And if you're conservative, you go to Fox News, you go to Sean Hannity and some of those areas. And really you go to where you already, blogs where you already agree. And so you never even look to see what the other side is saying or even get the perspective of the other side. And quite frankly, when I taught at USC, I asked my students, I said, okay, who's conservative? They raise their hand. Who's liberal? They raise their hand. So, okay, liberals, you have to watch Fox News. You conservatives, you have to watch MSNBC. Not to agree, but just to hear it. And most people today, they don't get another perspective. They only go to where they agree. And so when you talk about governing, that's where people want. They don't want that compromise, which legislative body by way of nature is compromise.
Yeah.
The idea of compromise on both sides is the other side capitulating completely. And that's not where it is realistically, but I think you have a lot of log jams in different forms of government because of that. And in California, look, there's no balance anymore. It's a super majority. Back in the day, the governor, Gray Davis, I would sit across this table like this, negotiating a budget agreement with Gray Davis. And so when you got that, they needed 6 of our votes, and they still needed to work across the aisle. Once they passed that law that said, 2/3, budget's passed by majority, Now they have a super majority on their side, and I actually think there's no balance in Sacramento. It's one side, and in fact, not just one side. It's the far left. Even what I would call a lot of the moderate Democrats I served with in
Do you think Orange County is more balanced?
No, I actually think in certain cities it's to the right, and in certain cities it's to the left. Okay. I joke, it's not a joke, but like Huntington Beach, we're a conservative city, and we represent our constituents well. A lot of people pushed us on the voter ID initiative that we put up before the voters, but the voter ID initiative passed over 7%. One of the big issues that we had over 100 speakers, and people were all upset that we said only flags that fly in front of City Hall are government flags. No specialty flags, and that actually passed by almost 16% by the voters of Huntington Beach. So we're pushing on a lot of these things, but we're a conservative city. At the same time we're doing voter ID in Huntington Beach, Santa Ana was doing their local municipal to allow, I believe non-citizens to vote, I believe is what they try to do. But you look at Santa Ana and Irvine, they're more left. And you look at places like Huntington Beach and Newport Beach, they're more to the right, center right.
One of the things that's always fascinated me about Orange County is that your coastal cities are more conservative. And
not Laguna Beach.
Not Laguna Beach. Fair enough. Or even North San Diego, I guess there's more conservative parts of there. Yeah. But by and large, a lot of the coastal parts of the state have gone pretty far to the left.
Yeah, other than here in Orange County.
That's what I mean, yeah.
Right.
This is kind of this grand exception. What do you ascribe the conservatism of Huntington Beach to? Why is it unique that way?
I just think people like the traditional values of they love this city, they love the suburban coastal community that it is. One of the biggest fundamental fights we have right now is against the state, because the state wants us to urbanize. They want us to turn in more like LA or San Francisco. Nothing wrong with urban living. I almost moved to New York out of college. But people here in Huntington Beach like the suburban coastal community feel that it has. And the RENA mandate that they put on us, the building mandate, would have pretty much equated to 50 high-rise, high-density buildings. And the reason why it's that, because we're 95% built out. The other 5% are the wetlands that no one wants to build in. And so in order to go along with the governor's mandate, we would have to, do high-rise, high-density buildings all up and down our city. And that would really fundamentally change it into an urban center. And that's not something our constituents want. It's not something our city wants.
So in 1984, Ronald Reagan comes to Fountain Valley and kicks off his re-election campaign. Mm-hmm. He wins that fall, obviously a historic victory. He wins Orange County by 430,000 votes. That was the margin.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I remember when Pete Wilson won, we had to win Orange County by 1 million votes. Right. In order to offset San Francisco and LA.
Los Angeles.
Yeah.
So Ronald Reagan never lost Orange County.
Right.
Would he win today?
I think Ronald Reagan would win today, without question. Ronald Reagan, because he's a great communicator. I think Ronald Reagan will go down in history as an Abe Lincoln, as one of the best presidents 100, 200 years from now.
Yeah.
I think people will remember Ronald Reagan in that fashion. There's a reason why I have a big poster of Ronald Reagan. He was my inspiration. Look, he helped defeat communism. He was a president that came in and made people proud to be an American again. If you remember what it was like when Jimmy Carter was president, we had a thing called stagflation. It's never been mentioned before, with a high unemployment and high interest rates. We had to wait in line. I still remember as a little kid, wait in line to get gas, like over an hour or two. And
odd and even plates.
Odd and even plates. Yeah. And then even Jimmy Carter said, we're going to have to learn to live more on less. This whole philosophy of the best years are behind us. Look, I still think California's best years and America's best years are ahead of us. Mm-hmm. And I wouldn't be doing this. The reason why you run for office, it's because of the future. It's because of my kids and my grandkids, your kids and grandkids. Every generation, and I learned this from my father, who was a career military soldier, it's up to every generation to leave the next generation better off than they had it and with more opportunity. I do believe we're at a cross points right now. Is America and California going to leave our kids and grandkids with more opportunity than what we had? And right now it's in question. It's probably the first time in first generation where that is in question. Are we going to leave our kids and grandkids? And there's a lot of things going on. that I get frustrated with, and I'll just mention the UC system. There's so many kids out there in our communities who are getting 4.5s, and they're remarkable. They have everything that you can possibly want, and they can't get in our UC system, but they can get into another prestigious school somewhere else. We pay those taxes. I think some of those students in California deserve to go to the UCIs, deserve to go to the UCLAs, deserve to go to, then they earned it. But a lot of it, you jack up the prices of a lot of the cost of going to these schools. A lot of students are now having a hard time. I know Joe Biden tried to say we're just going to pay off your debt, which I don't think is right. But I do think the universities now see that students are able to get these astronomical loans to pay for college. But here's what's wrong with our society. They're willing to give you astronomical loan to pay for college, but they're not willing to give you a business loan when you get out of college to actually make a career for yourself. Those are the things that we need to change in California in order to make it the gold state again.
So you started out with who Reagan was, but the question was, and I think you were working on getting there, is why the party is not the same party as Reagan's party.
Well, I mean,
is that unfair characterization?
No. It's not. There's no way. It's not unfair.
Time changes.
Time. Look, back in the day, when George Bush first ran in Texas, it was unheard of for a Republican to win in Texas. Things in demographics change in different states. West Virginia, they just had their primary yesterday. They used to be nothing but a Democratic state. Trump won West Virginia by a higher margin than Biden won California. So there's demographic changes, and people move and go to different places. And one of the things is a lot of center-right citizens have moved out of the state of California because people want to live in an area that they are comfortable with, that they have like-minded people around in their neighborhood. Look, there's been a lot of flight in California. It's the first time since we've become a state where we lost congressional representation. Think about it. Everybody in the world comes to California, and California is the best weather in the world. And since the gold rush, every 10 years we gain congressional representation. 2 cycles ago, 20 years, we stayed the same, and then we lost a seat in this last reapportionment census. And there's projections that we could lose 2 or 3 seats.
But isn't that a good thing if you want less density?
No, we have 95% of Californians live in 5% of the area space.
We just need to keep building out.
Yes.
Okay.
And look, Inland Empire, they're growing. They have economic opportunities. They have different businesses out there. You don't want them to go. You have so much different space around California that hasn't been developed. Again, 95% of Californians live in 5% of that area space. Time to move in and start looking at other areas to be able to help grow. But you only grow if people are coming here. People are leaving, they're not coming. And part of the reason why they're leaving also is the astronomical prices of houses. Let's look at California. You have CEQA policies, you have liability policies, you have mitigation and local fees on anybody that's developing. And when you add that all up to a developer, when it costs them $300,000-$400,000 a door, he's going to pass that on to the consumer in order for it to pencil out. Let's reform some of this stuff. Back in the day when CEQA first came out, good idea, and we should have environmental rules, but one person shouldn't be able to sue just to stop a project from happening. We should have reform there. Back in the day when it first came out, you had to be a DA or Attorney General in order for that suit to happen. There has to be some reforms in what it costs to build those doors and build those apartment buildings, homes, condominiums, because one of the main reasons of the jackup of the cost of the homes is the regulations coming out of Sacramento.
So what is the vision for the Republican Party going forward, and where do you see it in Orange County in 3, 5, 7 years?
I see us offering solutions on housing, that people have more affordable housing. Again, as I just talked about, reductions in some of the regulations. Number one role of government is public safety. We're going to be at the forefront of making sure people are safe. Right now, the Gascon kind of DA where people can do smash and grabs and not be prosecuted and take accountability out of society, that has to stop. So the line I like to use is we're going to make crime illegal again, and so you're going to do that. Letting people keep more of their hard-earned dollars, I think, is important because people work hard for that money. And when you spend someone else's money, you better spend it wisely. So we need to have more oversight on the money that we do spend to make sure it maximizes. An example is a homeless crisis. The money that we're spending from government, we can almost buy a home for everybody for what we're spending.
Yeah.
And are we actually doing oversight? We're losing and we're missing billions of dollars here, billions of dollars there. Pretty soon that adds up to a lot of money. We need to have more oversight, more accountability, and our party is going to be able to do that when it comes to crime, growing business, housing affordability, and water. I mean, we need to make sure we have an abundant amount of water across the state of California and capture water in the wet years and have more storage issues, more desal plants, and things like that. Because we do live in a desert, we need to make sure water is a lifeblood to any community. And so we're going to solve all those problems. We have the ideas to solve those problems, but it's really a matter of having the right leaders to sell those issues and getting the people on board.
We're trying to unfold a history, a past, present, and future. Mm-hmm. And why I want to sit with you is because you're doing something remarkable here. Mm-hmm. I mean, I think. Mm-hmm. You're providing a different direction.
Yeah.
Is that fair to say?
Offering a different... one of the quotes I love from Washington Post was, they said the conservatives in Huntington Beach have shown that they're the counterpoint to what's going on in Sacramento. Okay. And that's the best way to put it. It's a Washington Post quote. Uh-huh. And it's a quote is absolutely true.
Yeah.
And that's unique. That's unique, isn't it? You have a point. Yeah, you have a point and counterpoint, and we're showing, in my opinion, conservative leadership works.
Yeah, and that's why I want to come talk to you.
Yeah,
as I agree. I'm just trying to get it to the meat as to why.
Right.
Like what makes this city. Obviously, leadership is a big part of that. Obviously, I mean, we had a council change, but there's got to be something demographic. Which is why it's a little bit of, and it's not just this one, as you mentioned. There's other coastal communities here in Orange County, but it is largely.
But
it's largely Orange County.
I actually think it's leadership. I think it really comes down to.
So why?
I think it comes down to leadership. It comes down to being able to be bold, and be bold knowing that you believe your policies work. A lot of times people get beat up, and they're not bold. They back down to different kinds of pressures. Yeah. You have to be confident in that you're doing the right thing. And I think what we've proven in Huntington Beach, look, almost all the votes are 4-3. But the 4 people that we campaigned together, we did 110 events together, we know why we're here. We're here to provide conservative leadership and show that conservative leadership works. And we believe it's showing that it works. There's other cities across the state that have more of a majority than we do.
Yeah.
There's other cities across the state that have more conservative community than we do. But we've become the epicenter of the opposition to Sacramento because of leadership.
They're just too timid.
Yep.
And maybe if they just were not, you could build something a little bit bigger with.
Well, I'm hoping that we do a call to action.
Yeah.
On a lot of these things. Voter ID, for example. I believe that you're not going to change it from the top down. It's the only way to change it, and we have the ability to do it in local cities from the bottom up. Look, California is to America what America is to the world. California is the ingenuity, it's the capitalism, it's the optimism, it's everything that America is to the world. That's what California should be to America, and it used to be. We need to bring that Golden State back again.
Let's hear from longtime Orange County journalist Gene Pasco. How would you describe Orange County now?
Orange County had for a long time been a Democratic powerhouse because of the individuals involved and the amount of money that was there. When we saw the transition over to kind of developer Republicans, if you will, because there was so much of Orange County that was available to be developed, well, you need a lot of money to do that. And so then you get your Donald Brenns and people that, came in with a lot of money and wanted to make sure government was working for them, not against them. And so then a lot of money goes into politics to make sure that those elected officials are listening to people and and following the agendas that the folks that supported them really wanted. And so now things have, the Orange County is built out for the most part. I mean, you have gentrification and you have, infills and stuff like that. But for the most part, I mean, I think there might be some big neighborhoods in east of Mission Viejo that's still I haven't been there in a while, but there's not a lot of opportunity for additional building. Orange County's always been a place that was a little bit of a petri dish, with the Lincoln Project, and let's try something new. The folks that are there are not really responding and working the way we'd like to see them. So let's try something different. And that certainly was the case with the Clinton backers, the Orange 8, that made such a splash nationally. And so I'm kind of watching to see what happens. I follow everybody still on Facebook, and I still get the Times and the Register and all that, along with all the other papers. But when you look at it, it is truly purple. When you look at the way the House seats go, we'll see what happens in the with the Baugh David Min congressional race. See what happens there. At the local level, still seems to be a lot of Republicans, and I think that's more just the traditional institutional support that the party gives, because obviously they're nonpartisan races, so they don't have D or R, or I behind their names, but it's still something that matters to people. Their party identity is just, they don't want to be identified on the fringes.
Los Angeles Times columnist Gustavo Arellano offers his thoughts on Orange County's future.
A lot of cities are still getting their first Latino council members. Remember, Orange County's 33, 32 cities, but things are slowly changing, and it's coming from the progressive side, the young people. So now you're having connections between Anaheim and Santana, but you still have differences. Santana, right now, as we're talking, it's a burner majority. So it's not all Latinos, but it's people who supported Bernie Sanders. So it's super progressive city council. They're voting for rent control. They're voting for a deportation fund for folks, all super progressive. Anaheim is a Latino majority city council as well, but only one of them is a progressive. The other one, and they're all, I think 2 of them are Democrats and one, I don't know what he is. The Cuban, of course. Of course, you never know what they are in Southern California, but they are siding with Disney. They're the ones whose names, who are, if not apologists for Disney, because no one wants to be an apologist for Disney, they definitely are voting against ordinances for hotel workers to improve their wages. They're the ones who are nowhere near as progressive as Santana. So they're running against the union power, Mike. But I would say that the Anaheim electorate is far more conservative than the Santana electorate, and I would really attribute that to both at the end, I really think it's where these Mexicanos and where these Latinos are coming from.
Are you seeing that dynamic play out more here in Orange County or more in LA?
No, LA's left of left. Orange County left is LA moderate Democrat. Mm-hmm. Like LA is a whole other galaxy of the political spectrum. They're like Latino Republicans, I'm sure they exist. I'm sure there are somewhere in the valley. I saw some of them come out for Rick Caruso. But I think also in Los Angeles, you also have more of those that political tradition. So you're seeing problems up there that you don't see here in Orange County. Like you don't see much infighting. Like I don't see much infighting between different camps in Orange County. There's more like rivalries or like petty stuff. But like in LA, like gosh, it's biblical. What happens on the east side, what happens in southeast LA. Mm-hmm. So I would say in Orange County, we should follow our own playbook. We should not follow what happens in Los Angeles. And don't get me wrong, I love LA. I think LA is great. That was the cradle of Latino political power for the United States. Sorry, San Antonio, you're not it, as much as I love San Antonio. But in Orange County, our dynamics are different. Like even in Santana is 80% Latino, yes, but you have to contend with other, ethnicities. In Boyle Heights, you only have to contend with Latinos. It's so Latino. You know, maybe some parts of, well, in Boyle Heights specifically, in the San Fernando Valley, that's kind of changing a little bit. But if we as Latinos in Orange County, if we want to set a precedent, we could set a precedent as Latinos in this modern day multicultural coalition of ideologies as opposed to just ethnicity.
We sat down with TV host Christina Beek-Trom-Lay, one of the most prominent journalists in her community, to explain the Vietnamese American perspective.
Trump's anti-China rhetoric in 2020 really resonated with first-generation Vietnamese. China had colonized Vietnam, right, for thousands of years. And there's also continued conflict today over territorial claims of islands. So some Vietnamese naively believed that a Trump term would lead to the demise of the Chinese government, and then Vietnam would be free of its dominance. It's worth noting that during Trump's term, protection for Vietnamese war refugees living in the US was at risk because the Trump administration took an agreement that was cobbled together in 2008 with the Vietnam government that protected the war refugees who came here. But Trump took that and expanded the categories of refugees that it can deport, including those permanent residents who have committed certain crimes, even though they might have served out the prison, the prison term, and as well as the people who came to the US as children after the war, and they've lived here most of their lives. So thousands of Vietnamese refugees were deported back to Vietnam under Trump as a result. So yes, there's now a clear divide between generations, with the power struggle underway to decide which way, going forward, voters will lean. Now, I can tell you about some signs, right? Longtime GOP Vietnamese, Frank Giao, he's the developer of Little Saigon, and he's a longtime GOP member. He considered changing his registration to no party, as he thought Trump went too far when he pulled out of the TPP, the Trans-Pacific Partnership, which was meant to counteract China's power, as well as the Paris Climate Accord. And then in 2020, Republican incumbent Assemblyman Tyler Zip, he lost the backing of the Republican Party because he was deemed too labor-friendly. And then he lost his seat, his assembly seat, to another Vietnamese Republican that was backed by the party. So the party basically dropped Tyler Zip and then backed another Vietnamese, Janet Nguyen. So Zip changed his registration to no party preference in 2021 after the January 6th event. So since 2020, the community has seen the birth of a number of Vietnamese voter advocacy organizations in Orange County, including something called Pivot, which is a progressive Vietnamese American organization. There's also a fact-checking arm of Pivot called Viet Fact Check to combat misinformation. And there's also a group called Viet Rise. So this group champions social justice for Vietnamese, and it's led mostly by young Vietnamese Americans. Now, in terms of the internal tension in the community, unfortunately, yes, there's been some bitter political rifts which divided the community into factions. Vietnamese American politics can be clannish and marked by shifting alliances and have turned friends into foes, right? So this shifting phenomenon is known to have occurred within the Westminster City Council and in a number of congressional, supervisor, and assembly races. with consequences. Case in point, during the 2018 midterm, so after 2 years of a Trump presidency and amidst a blue wave that swept over the county, Janet Nguyen, who's a Republican, she lost her re-election bid for 34th District State Senate to Democratic challenger Tom Umberg. And the blue wave was just one reason. There were some in the community that thought that the reason that she lost was due to the bickering that went on between Nguyen and other Vietnamese Republican officials. People like Andrew Do, Văn Trần, Trí Tạ, Tyler Yip, for reasons unknown and unrelated to her campaign. And that has served to alienate Viet voters. The biggest conflict in Orange County Vietnamese politics is actually between two Republican factions, led by Janet Nguyen and Andrew Do and Văn Trần. Andrew Do and Văn Trần are in the same faction. So there's much more hostility between them than between the Vietnamese Republicans and the Vietnamese Democrats.
Interesting.
Now, all of this turmoil is happening on the watch of the first generation and the 1.5 generation of Vietnamese Americans who came from a war-torn South Vietnam. South Vietnam was just a budding democracy. So there is hope that when the torch is passed down to second and third generation Vietnamese, things might be a little different. One can only hope.
So what does the future hold for both parties? Who would you say is doing a good job in terms of outreach, or a bad job, or are they both doing some good and some bad?
Right, so the Republican Party did a good job in recruiting Vietnamese candidates, the Văn Trần of the world, if you will, who can bring in voters. The party has been able to appeal to Vietnamese businesses in the community, as well as older first-generation Viet voters. The Democrats did a good job in organizing younger Vietnamese, like Viet Rise, the organization that champions social justice that I told you about. Now, in terms of outreach effort, the Republican Party recently opened a community center in Little Saigon, just ahead of the 2024 elections. And the Democrats organized some outreach events called Little Saigon Day of Action. Going forward, I would say that both parties will be competitive in the community.
Political consultant Stu Spencer, who ran Ronald Reagan's gubernatorial campaign in California in 1966, and perhaps more than any political consultant in history, had a hand in crafting what Reagan conservatism meant politically, thinks today's Republican Party is in trouble. Is it fixable, Stu, or no?
I'm not sure it is. I'm not sure that there's going to be a Republican Party. This may be the swan song.
Why is that?
Because of Trump and its philosophical base.
This change in the Republican Party, it doesn't feel to you the rise of Reaganism and the change of the party?
No.
It's not the same thing.
No.
People that say that...
It's not a positive vein. It's hate. If it hates somebody or hates some group of people or something like that, you got an open field with this guy, Trump. He'll find room for you in the show.
And the whole centrality of Reaganism was optimism.
That's right.
This happy warrior with a positive vision of America and who we
Shining
were, where we were
light
going.
on a hill.
Shining city on a hill, right? And so you think this might be, if it's not the end of the party, it's certainly the end of the party that you saw emerge.
That party's gone, period, now.
The country's just in a different place.
The country is in a different place. The line is pretty well drawn. I mean, I can tell you what congressmen are Trumpies. I can tell you There's a Trumpy group and the rest of us.
Are they the majority?
Yes. I say that not because of numbers, but because of the speakership. They control the speakers. They control all the money people. The big Republican donors historically are leaving us. They're going with demos.
As we wrap up this podcast series, I wanted to return to UC Irvine's School of Social Ecology, where the whole story began, and have a conversation with Dean John Gould. Dean Gould, thanks for joining us in this last part of a truly remarkable series. We've explored Orange County's past, its robust and dynamic present, and what I wanted to get from you was, what does this all mean for the future?
It's a great question. And first of all, Mike, thanks so much for having been the host of this. It really is a remarkable series. As Orange County has moved from this ruby red bastion of conservatism to this purple county of today, we've seen a lot of things going on here that we're seeing elsewhere in the country. So we've seen the rise of different racial and ethnic groups and how they have more power in the county, how they may be voting differently than they have in the past. We've also seen how people from the left and the right have found some ways to collaborate and move the county forward. So I think what we've seen here is the past, but also the future of America right here in Orange County. And so if you want to have a sense of what may be happening elsewhere in the country in the years ahead, pay attention to what's been happening here and is still happening here today.
Thank you for joining me on this journey through Orange County. There are few better destinations, in my opinion, to understand the coming America. From mountains to the sea, hiking trails and beaches, must-see attractions and perfect weather, it's a community that has also embraced the complexities of modern life, a diverse society, and has chosen to move forward together, united in that diversity. For me, this purple balance of the county isn't a sign of confusion, chaos, or indecision at all, but rather it's a mark of maturity, growth, hope, and promise for where this fragile experiment of democracy is going. The story of this county is one of extraordinary transformation and change. Whether it's racial and ethnic change, economic transformation, high-tech anxiety, or changing cultural perspectives. Orange County is a look into the future. And what we've learned through this series, through this podcast, is that future is neither a red county, a blue county, or an orange county. It's truly a purple county. Thanks for coming on the journey with us. I'd like to thank all of our guests, Stu Spencer, Loretta Sanchez, Gustavo Arellano, Christine Lay, Gene Pasco, Tom Umberg, Dave Wasserman, Tony Strickland, and John Gould. And our producers and editors, Mimi Coe Cruz, Han Parker, and Matt Coker.